If you've never heard of the Witcher series, I highly recommend you play the games. But what I'm talking about today is what the games were based on. The games were based on a series of books made by a Polish author named Andrzej Sapkowski. I don't care if I got it wrong. And they're kind of grungy, realistic fantasy. They have monsters, but all the heroes are very realistic and flawed and kind of just trying to live their life in a really crappy Eastern European styled land. The first chronological book in the series, and by that I mean that this is technically a prequel that was made after several other books. This book's called The Last Wish. You can get it on Amazon if you want to buy it. The Last Wish is separated into 7 segments. The first one is just called The Witcher. It's supposed to introduce you to the character and kind of get you used to what you would expect from the series. So Geralt of Rivia is the main character. He enters a province called Vizima, and very early he kills some people and gets arrested and brought to the king, and he tells the king that he'll help him get his sister back. Now, these stories are so complex. There's so much backstory for everybody that it is very, very difficult to actually go into depth without making this a literal 1-hour discussion video. So, in short, I'll just say that Geralt has to break a curse that had made somebody into a monster. And somebody in his profession usually would just kill that monster. But there are people who want to see this girl saved, but also people who want to see her die for certain reasons. It's very political, which you might think is boring, but they don't dwell in the political stuff. The main character, Geralt, is just as uninterested in politics as the reader is. The point is that Geralt does all this for money. He doesn't care much about anything else, or at least that's what he wants you to think. So the rest of the whole mini-story is just him setting up traps, learning information about the monster, and figuring out how not to die while trying to save this monster. It's kind of a perfect introduction because there are very few characters, and you get a very detailed, in-depth explanation for why he does basically everything. As a result, there are certain abilities that he doesn't show off in this story, because if he did, then maybe it'd make the fight less thrilling. It's kind of odd how you kind of learn later that he has these 5 more or less magical abilities. Not overpowered, they're very slight. But he doesn't use more than just like 1 in this fight. But it's very dramatic, it's very tension building. Even if you know he's going to live, the way in which he's going to live is very tough to process. It's a very realistic world. In the next section, this portion is called The Lesser Evil. Geralt goes to this town in the middle of the country. He had just killed a monster, and he's trying to see if anybody will give him money for this monster that he killed, just that attacked him on the side of the road, basically. For most of this story, it's like, oh, well, he's just in this town, what's actually going to happen? And, he learns a little bit about the town, and it's nothing special. The only thing of note is that there's this mage in town who has his own tower, and he wants to be left alone, whatever. But as you go through it, it turns out there's just these kind of generic thugs that want to apparently go after this mage. Kind of just seems very basic. But then that's when you go into this insanely detailed, insanely tragic and very classic backstory on what this mage has done, why these people want to go after him, and how, as horrible as everything is that has led up to this event, Geralt can't allow these people to do what they want to do. It's not good and evil. As much as it sounds like here's the good guys and here's the bad guys, at the end of the day, everybody was the bad guy. And in the end, even Geralt is considered a bad guy. You might think that that's a spoiler, but there's just so much tension. It's just dripping with tension. And when I say it's all very classic, it's... if I didn't know better, I would think that this story was made 2 or 3 or more centuries ago. It's like an old style fairy tale, or maybe not even a fairy tale, more like an old style folklore tale. Yet this book, The Last Wish, was made in like the early 90s, basically. Well, maybe a little later, maybe more like mid 90s, but you know, very modern. You know, obviously, again, from Poland, so the author's most likely just pulling from Polish mythology or old folk tales. But even so, the wording, I mean, you know, I guess I have to give props to the translation, actually, because, you know, obviously it was written in Polish. It was translated by Danusia Stock. Kind of sounds maybe Polish as well, but they definitely know how to write English. It's very well done. It's very real. It's very bittersweet. Again, very action-centric for the climax, but otherwise a lot of build-up involving backstories and a lot of local lore of the places that Geralt visits. This portion is called The Edge of the World. It's even more complex. Geralt has this friend called Dandelion. At least in the English version, he's called Dandelion. Apparently, he has a other name in Polish, but you'll know him as Dandelion. Him and Dandelion go and visit this little village out in the country, and they run into this little creature that's messing with crops. And from there, it just escalates into what would basically just be a full-on race war. Because, you know, again, this is a very introductory book. Up to this point, you've only been really dealing with monsters and humans, but there are beings other than monsters and humans that are intelligent and have societies. Not that the humans like that that's the case. Just know that there's quite a lot of portions where Geralt is kind of a negotiator. He's the barrier between how the humans understand the world and how the monsters who used to be everywhere in the world are now slowly dying out. They can't survive with the humans because the humans won't let them. Now there is another story in here, which is actually what the entire book is named after, that I have completely forgotten. Because there's just so many parts to every little part in this book. The last portion is called The Last Wish. Dandelion and Geralt are walking through the country and they come upon this city. And once again, they hear about a mage who is using their powers, this time to help people, but again, they don't want to be seen. However, before they enter the town, Dandelion gets severely injured by this very, very unknown creature. And basically, Geralt ends up needing to find this mage in order to heal him. However, this gets Geralt into the debt of this mage, and the mage pretty much forces him to do whatever they want him to do. Geralt is mostly just manipulated through all this, and he has very little influence in the story. He's at the whims of this mysterious mage. I'm really going around the spoilers here because it is like the most impactful thing in the whole series from what I've heard. Just know that there is a genie involved, and it's somebody's pursuit for this genie. Damn everybody else involved. Doesn't matter. Again, everybody is motivated by their own greed, their own wishes, and everybody has a little more depth in them than you would ever expect. Now, I know that everything I've said might sound a little too vague, and again, I have skipped through a few sections just because they're the smaller, very much smaller sections of the book. There's, again, 7 sections in all, with some more characters than I'm mentioning, because, there's only 3 or maybe 4 main characters that continue throughout the whole series. Obviously there's other recurring random characters, but again, mostly 3 or 4 continuing characters. On its own, this book would probably be like a 7 out of 10 for me. It is very difficult to separate from other knowledge I know about the characters, but if you're coming into this series fresh, it's a good introduction to the world, the characters, the tone, the morality. Even if you don't even read any other book in the series, it's a really fresh take on Arthurian legends, and I highly, highly recommend it.